You asked me also what books do I recommend? Well, Brother Arrowwood, who was my assistant, now is the pastor of the Seymour Church, he has written a book about suffering with purpose by Larry Arrowwood. That would be a good book for a young minister to get. J.T. Pugh wrote a book called The Flesh of God, which I think is a good one. Archaeology and the Bible, Raymond Cornell, who was a very close friend of mine. He pastored many years up in northern Indiana. He's close to my age, and we're both retired, but he still speaks all around the world. He travels a lot. Another good book is The Messiah's Coming Temple. If you'd like to study Revelation, John W. Schmidt is the author of that book, along with Carl Lanex, Lanex. I'm sure you can order it online. And then my last book, that I think is one of the finest books that I ever read, happens to be Our Man in Damascus, written by Eli Ben Hannon, Hanan, about a Israeli spy in the 1967 war. Eli Cohen was in Egypt, and he got involved in the Arab army, but he was a spy for the Israelis. He is a national hero in Israel, and he was caught after the Six-Day War because he caused all of the Syrian tanks and planes. He radioed constantly where the airplanes were kept and where the tanks were kept. And when Israel attacked on the first day of the Six-Day War, they literally wiped out all of the tanks and the air defenses in Syria and in Egypt, both. It was a miraculous Six-Day War, and they finally found out that Eli Cohen was the reason that Israel had such a great victory in just 6 days. I was there just a few days after the Six-Day War. In fact, we were supposed to go there before the war started, and we were canceled for a couple weeks until they got the war over with, and then, it was very peaceful when we got there. But Eli Cohen was hung by his neck, of course, when they found out that he was an Israeli spy. And that book, you won't put it down. So there's 4 or 5 books that I think it would be nice for a young minister to have. So another thing that you asked about what ministers need to watch out for. The biggest thing that a young minister, or any minister for that matter, but especially the young ministers, that you have your wife with you or one of the elders with you when you counsel anybody. Don't ever counsel a member of the opposite sex without somebody being there with you. Being on the district board for a number of years in Indiana, I saw that happen to several preachers, and it ruined their ministry. And I think that that's one of the biggest things that a minister needs to watch out for. Watch out, too, for what you say to people. A lot of times we get in the pulpit and we say things that we don't realize how hurtful that they can be. And now in this day and age of lawsuits, I think a young minister has got to watch out that he makes no racial comments or sexual preferences or not to even mention politics in the pulpit. I think that's Brother Carpenter does not even mention anything about politics at all. And I admire him for that. Now, the best way to overcome distractions, be aware at all times that you are a representative of Jesus Christ in the ministry. And you should be decent, respectable, watch what you say, watch where you go. Don't give the devil a chance to hurt your ministry, because he will try to do it. He works on every ministry. I don't care who he is, and some have succumbed to the wiles of the devil. But I promise you that is a very important thing for a young minister to be aware at all times when he's downtown or when he's away from home, that you be a representative of Jesus Christ. When you go to a motel to spend the night, or when you talk to the man on the street, there's 1,001 places for the devil to work on you, but you must be a representative at all times. And set a time every day for prayer and Bible reading. I do mine in the evening while I'm in the bedroom. I read several chapters of the Bible, and I have my prayer in the bedroom. Also, I read still. I read the Bible through last year. And I continue. He never stopped studying in the ministry. I don't care how old you are. If you want to be used of God, you've got to prepare. And a lot of preachers just throw a sermon together and don't really pray about it, don't really let God reveal to him what he should do. And, we've got a lot of popular ministers in Pentecost that are supposedly great preachers because they preach because of the times and everything like that. And people admire them. But let me tell you, to be a young man who is faithful to his church, you don't have to be a great orator. You just have to be a good representative of Jesus Christ. I never was a great pulpit man. My forte was teaching. But I'm not a novice at sermons either, but the fivefold ministry, some pastors, some teachers, some evangelists, apostles and prophets. I felt like that teaching was my forte. And every time that I try to study for a sermon, there's 100 sermons in the book of Acts alone. And if you're preaching like to the Spanish people, if you're preaching to them, that's the best book to preach out of. They run to the altar. I can't get over of how these Spanish people are excited about the stories in the book of Acts. And you compare that to them. A lot of my sermons are from the book of Acts and the revival. Okay, so set a time every day for prayer and Bible reading, and set a time for visiting hospitals. I visited the hospital every other day. Brother Arrowwood did the off days, so we switched off. But it's important that you visit the sick. That's something that the Bible tells you to do, is it to visit the sick and those in prison. If I didn't have anything to do and I was a young man, I'd want to start a prison ministry. There's all kinds of things that a minister can do if he just will think of how he can help out in the kingdom of God. And if you pray about that, God will open doors for you. Once again, in 1980, when I started Indiana Bible College, this new building was open, it had a gymnasium that seats 5,000 people, another gym that 1,500, and they left all all the desks and left all the kitchen facilities there, and we got that for $125,000. And 1980, that was pretty good money. But the businessmen of the town came up to me and said, we would like for you to go into that debt-free. And I had 4 businessmen around town. One was an attorney, one's the former governor of Indiana, Edgar Whitcomb, who come to our church often. And he wanted to, we saw it come out in the paper that we wanted to buy this former Seymour High School. He only lived a block away from the school in a 28-room mansion. And he called me one day and he said, Brother Croucher, and he said, I'd like to help you raise that money to buy that building. And we were the only ones that bid on that building. And we got it for $125,000. I think $150 when we bought the other gym. But it was on several acres. The building is no longer there since we moved to the Bible College to Indianapolis. But now there are things that can happen in the ministry that if you're not stable and if you're not firm in what you believe, Satan will try to kill you. He'll try to destroy you. We were in our new building that we've been a revival with Spencer McCool from Michigan. And on a Saturday night, and by the way, the Seymour Church started by a 13-week revival, 7 nights. For 13 weeks, no off nights. That's how the Seymour Church was started.
Praise God.
So, and it's still going very, very strong. God, the Governor Whitcomb, when I was a boy passing papers, he was an attorney in Seymour. He was a Republican governor, very, very popular. But before he was governor, he was an attorney, and I happened to pass papers, his paper. And every once in a while, he'd come out of his office, and I'd be riding on my bicycle, passing the papers. He'd stop and talk to me because he knew my dad real well. My dad was in politics. And he was a precinct committeeman. And Governor Whitcomb knew me when I was 12 to 16 years of age before I went to Bible college. And then when he saw it in the paper that we were interested in that building, they were going to give it to the city of Seymour for a sum of $1. And Governor Whitcomb asked me, he called me on the phone, he said, would you come and go with me to a meeting of the school board because they're going to give that massive building away for $1. And I said, well, I hadn't seen the governor for several years when I was in Bible college, and then several years after I started the church in Seymour. But our paths never crossed after that. But when it came out in the paper, the Reverend Croucher and the Apostolic Church wants to buy the building. So we went to that school board meeting, and the only people that were there in the audience was Governor Whitcomb, myself, and a lady reporter from the local newspaper. And the 7 board members, I know they looked back and wondered, what is the governor doing here? They didn't say anything. They didn't come back and talk to him or anything. And one guy made a motion to give the church, the school building, Seymour High School, to give it to the city of Seymour for the sum of $1. And another man seconded the motion. And then the president of the board said, is there any discussion? And Governor Governor Whitcomb got up. He was sitting right beside me. He got up, and he said, I object to you giving this building away for $1 when there's a man right here who wanted to give you money for it. I'd like to die, you know. We don't. They were asking a couple $1 million for the building, and I just almost sunk in my seat. And the reporter, she was writing all these notes down. So then they said, okay, we'll just table the motion till the next meeting. In the meantime, we'll put the school up for auction. Well, we happen to be the only one to bid on that building. And Governor Whitcomb said, I'll help you raise every dime of this money. Nobody bid against us. The governor called a couple of the people that the newspaper, during a 30-day period between the school board meetings, a couple of people were interested in the building besides us for condominiums or something like that. And Governor Whitcomb called me one day. He said, can I come pick you up? I want to talk to you. I said, okay. So we went to his house. It's a fabulous built house. He has a garage and an underground tunnel to his house. And it's very, very beautiful. And he said, sit down with me. He said, I want to make some phone calls. And I didn't know what he was going to do. And he said to me, sit here in the living room. I want to make a phone call. So he told the two people that were going to bid on the building, I heard him say it. He said, I don't want you to bid on this building because we want a Bible college here in this town. And he stopped both of them from bidding on it. And not only did he stop them from bidding, they each gave $25,000 toward it. Governor Whitcomb gave $25,000, and the attorney guy did $20,000. A Jewish man even gave money who owned a building downtown, a dress shop. And they raised every bit of that money. And I thought to myself, this has to be God. Because we didn't have the money, you know.
Yeah.
So that's the way God works. So I'd like to say, I just about finished, but I'd like to tell you one other thing. During the revival on a Saturday night, Spencer McCool was preaching this revival for us. And my daughter-in-law was not there at the service. She had to work, and she'd get home till about 10:30 after the meeting was over. The meeting was at the Ponderosa Steakhouse, and when she came in to the driveway, she got out of the car, and two people grabbed her, and they strangled her and took her across the road into a grove of trees. And there, my son, David, he was at church at revival time, and he went home to pick her up, and then they were going to go out and get a bite to eat. Well, when she drove in the driveway, she was accosted by two men, and they sexually molested her and strangled her. And the ambulance came. I found the body because at her car there was a purse, keys, and one high heel shoe right as then the door was opened where she'd gotten out. And when I drove in the driveway after my son had called me, I ran over a shoe. And so I pulled in behind her car, and I said to my son, I said, well, what's the matter? He said, Dad, I can't find Carrie. She's come home. And here's her purse, and keys, and It was about 11 o'clock by that time in the evening, and it was in November 20, the 13th of November. And I told David, I said, I ran over a shoe out by the road, and I said, I want to go get this shoe to see if that was her shoe. So, and it was. So as I picked up the shoe, there was a street light there, and I went across the road into a grove of trees and a golf course, and there she lay. And she was almost dead, just a faint pulse beat and a faint heartbeat. And they took her to the emergency room, and my doctor was there. He was called in, and he said to me, Reverend Croucher, I hate to tell you this, but we can't do anything for her. My suggestion is you get a helicopter and take her to Methodist Hospital in Indianapolis. And we did, and she died the next morning. This was the second year of the Bible College, and it was the first year in our new building, and during the revival on a Saturday night when this all happened. So if you think the devil will not fight you, a young minister, you're grossly wrong, because he hates anybody that's doing anything for God. 2 years went by, and there was no arrests. I knew who did it because he confessed to me that he did it. He came into my office one day and told me that he had killed her. He felt bad about it. And I went to the prosecutor and gave him the tape. I had it taped. But anyway, after 2 years and nobody was arrested, it really was a bad thing for the Bible College, because people didn't want to hardly send their students there when there's a murder loose in Seymour. So at the end of the 2-year period, I worked and worked and worked to try to find out how I could get this over to the prosecutor. And all of a sudden, I got a phone call from the sheriff. And he said, is this Reverend Croucher? And I said, yes, it is. He said, where's your son? And I said, well, he's over at my mother's house. Why? He said, we're going to arrest him for the murder of Carrie Croucher. And I said, are you kidding me? The boy was in church with me. Well, we think you and him went together, and one of you grabbed her by the neck, the other by the ankles, and you strangled her. I said, you are crazy. Absolutely crazy. And, I argued with the sheriff. He said, well, if you don't have him here at the courthouse within a half hour, we're coming to get him. So I went up to my mother's house, picked him up, took him to Brownstown courthouse. And when we got there were television cameras, there were radio people, there were newspaper people, flashing flash bulbs. And when we got out of the car in front of the sheriff's department, they grabbed my son, put shackles on his feet and shackles on his arms, and took him into jail. I could not believe this, that they would be doing this. So finally, I had to get an attorney, and so they wouldn't give him bail for 4 months. He was in jail for 4 months. At the end of 4 months, I had an attorney from Indianapolis who was the best attorney in the state for murder cases. He told me he only lost one murder case in his life. He said that was when the guy admitted he did it. But his name was Tom Jones, and he was probably one of the best attorneys that I ever had been able to talk to. He was first class. And when you got a situation like this, you you can't take chances that this was some novice attorney. So I had to mortgage my home and everything else. And at the end of 4 months, we went to court, and the prosecutor would not give any evidence of David murdering his wife or me being accompaniment. And the judge said, we can't leave a man in jail if you're not going to present any evidence that this man committed the crime. So he let David go on $2,500 bail. Can you believe that? $2,500. Some businessman that owned a funeral home was there, and he paid the $2,500 for me. He knew that David had not done it, because David was in the church. His wife was in church. They'd been married 3 years. He was ready to have a baby. And when this happened, and David just, played on the orchestra, and was a Bible student and everything. Well, we had won so many people in that town from different churches that the preachers did not even back us. And half the town believed the police, and the other half did not, because they knew us and David. I mean, they put my name in there, president of Indiana Bible College, and this and this and this. Always put president of Indiana Bible College, making it look worse. So that never got to trial for 5 more years after that 2-year period when they arrested him. They kept stalling the trial. It cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars. And at the end of the 5 years, we finally decided that they don't want to bring it to court. And my attorney said, they don't have any evidence. He said, I have the discovery, and they do not have any evidence that you or David did this. And they asked us if we would take polygraph tests. And I said, yes, we would. So I took one. David took one in the state police post. And they come out and told us to our face, well, you passed both tests. Both of you passed the test. And they made us sign something that we could use this in court. Our attorney said, be sure that if you're going to take polygraph tests, that the results of that test can be used in court, because ordinarily it would not be admissible evidence. But if you sign by an attorney that it can be results be in court. Well, that was one good thing that we did, and when we finally got to court at the end of this 7-year period, the court only lasted about a day, because the police, they got the state police captain on the stand, and they really believed that David and I was involved in this without any evidence. And so when we got there, our attorney told me that day, he said, this is going to be the day of your vindication. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, you'll find out. So he got that state policeman up on the stand, and he said, we have been waiting 7 years for all the stallings of these trials. You never gave a man an opportunity to have a speedy trial. You stopped it and said you want to do it, but do it at another time. So finally we got to court. He got that policeman on the stand, and he said, now I want you to tell, and the audience was full, the courtroom was full. And he said, tell us what evidence that you have that David Croucher murdered his wife. And he said, we believe we have a gut feeling that he did it. And 50% of the husbands are responsible, the spouses are responsible for the wife's death or husband's death. And our attorney went into spasms. He yelled at that policeman. I never heard anybody get a falling out like that ever before. He said, this is not the Soviet Union. This man had a right to a trial by jury quickly, and you have a gut feeling he did it? And he said, and furthermore, 50% of the people who murder the wife, 50% don't murder. And I mean, that was basically the end of the trial. I mean, it had a few other people testify, but that policeman, when he said, we have a gut feeling he did it. Well, David was exonerated, of course, not guilty. The jury was only out an hour. And the Baptist preacher was the foreman of the jury. I was a little concerned about that, but it was pretty obvious they had no evidence, and you can't arrest a man on evidence. And I talked with the prosecutor. I have a tape prosecutor. This was after the trial. That this man confessed to it. He said, well, we believe your son did it. We're not going to look anyplace else. So at the end of this time, we still continued the Bible college for several more years, but it just absolutely ruined the city. Half believed David did it, half believed he didn't do it, half believed I was involved in the murder, another half didn't. My church stayed pretty firm through the situation. We lost a few people, but nothing was really serious. But I called Brother Mooney, and I said, Brother Mooney, after 10 years here, I said, it's time that I consider moving to another place. And, of course, I told you, Brother Mooney said that he would take it. But the 30 years, see, this happened in 1983, the murder. So it's with almost 30 years. They've had 300 students a year. Every year. They've been the largest Bible college in the United Pentecostal Church in Indianapolis. And, you know, it seemed like, I had worked so hard to get this started, and then the devil comes in and tries to destroy it. But, you know, my wife and I and son, we never wavered. And the church never wavered, hardly at all. And it came out, of course, that Brother Mooney would take the school. And I thought, Lord, we probably could never, in a little small town like Seymour, probably could never have 300 students, you know, but Calvary Tabernacle could, and Brother Mooney. And so I look back on the situation. I got it started when nobody thought we could start it. The Children's Education did not want us to have it. We had to appeal to the general board, and then we finally got the right to start the Bible college. It really hurt me for a long time until I understood that everything happens for the best. And I never wavered at all. I just trusted and believed that God had a plan, and I didn't see the end of it. But now, looking back on it, I do see why that happened. Indiana was a perfect place for a Bible college, centrally located in the Midwest. With people from almost every state in the Midwest and some foreign countries. So my advice to a young man is you may have a lot of things you may have. Building that seats 1,500 people, governor may have helped you. Debt-free church, debt-free Bible college. But you can't deny the fact that Satan hates progress. And I totally understand that today. It was a little harder for me then, but I totally understand it today that God knows best. But every young minister will go through something. You may go through a murder, it could be a cancer, children die. I know Brother Ershon's daughter passed away during this time, and we were very close friends with her. Went to Bible college together with her. She died of leukemia. So you think that the general superintendent, he's not without the ability to have to fight the devil. The devil will fight him.